Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, Viking Rob, as it were, because tonight's movie is The Northman, starring a Skarsgård and a bunch of other interesting things to it. And from the great Midwest, closer to Viking territory than I, here broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Pass in Central Florida. Of course, I'm talking about RDB from the great Midwest. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Yes, I am the Northman.
You are. You have snow on the ground many months of the year, and you see ice occasionally, and you tweet me pictures of really cold things that I
Yes,
don't
and I can
understand.
communicate with dogs as well.
Speaking of communicating with dogs, there is apparently two schools of thought when it comes to the Northman, and when we go actually to the highest level here, Robert Eggers in general, the person who directed this. Robert Eggers is known for doing The Witch, The Lighthouse, and of course this movie, The Northman. And I have to simply sit there and say, in all honesty, I think all three are great films. They're if you've seen them all and you go into the next Eggers film, even if it's a remake of Nosferatu, which has been talked about, or something else, you're going to understand what a Robert Eggers film is, and that can be a good or bad thing. And in this case, to me, it's not a bad thing, because it's one thing for us to sit here and say to everybody, and like for my initial thoughts, well, it looks good, it sounds good, it's artistic and all that too. But we were talking backstage briefly about a TV show I just started to watch based on some of our viewers' recommendations, a show called Bosch, and I'm telling you what I like about it and don't. And you made a comment in there that I thought was very appropriate for this movie, where either nobody matters or everybody matters, and that's at least the philosophy we sort of get from the Detective Bosch. Well, how does that apply to Northman? Well, it's simple. So it's a story that we're all familiar with. It doesn't have to be deep. It doesn't have to be exotic. It has to be executed well. And it has to have characters that you care about. And you have to understand the sides to it. And honestly, no compromise too. One of the strengths of this film, and then I'll hand it over to you for your initial thoughts, is besides it being visually stunning and very watchable that way, it's X-rated in a sense in its graphicness, and I appreciate that. I respect that. I don't think they abuse it. Unlike, say, the X-rated nature of the violence that we talked about in the movie we just recently reviewed in Class of Duke of Mine from 1986, right? But this is a film I really like. I think it's a film you can really enjoy. I think, unfortunately, today, a lot of the younger generation, generally speaking, has a short attention span, especially with the types of movies that are out. So I think this being actually a longer movie and very deliberate might be a turnoff for some people, too. So I'm curious to see what your initial thoughts are before we dive into some of the great stuff that we got to talk about tonight.
This film I've been hearing mixed reviews. I've heard people that loved it. I've heard people that thought it was good, but also very underwhelming as far as delivering. I guess my biggest problem with this movie is probably my only problem is the pace. The story's good. The gore, the fighting, the authenticity is great.
Yes.
It's just I was just thinking about, we're talking about backstage. I was like, so I was trying to compare this, I'm like, to another movie I've seen, recently, and that was Conan the Barbarian.
The original?
The original. Yes. I've never watched the other one. Doesn't exist. Talk about.
There's no other Conan besides the
original. Arnold, that's it. And I gotta say, it's like this movie almost feels similar to that.
Heavily inspired by it, definitely, no question.
No question about it. It's a simple movie from A to B. You got a kid who his dad was murdered, his mom was carried away. He was meant to be killed, but he escaped, and he got raised by these Vikings. He grew up, got big and strong. Now he seeks revenge for his father and to rescue his mother. Like I say, it's just, for me, that it was just the slow pace. If it would have been a little bit faster, because when I think of Vikings movies, I think of usually it's a lot of fighting. Yeah. There might be a little lovemaking here, and I'm thankful there was only one small, not even 5-second scene of lovemaking, and that was about it. Oh, the rest of it was actually more about him getting, leaving, becoming a slave and trying to go to North Iceland, and just basically to rescue his mother and kill his uncle. Scenery, awesome. Yep. Takes place in Iceland, and I think what was the other place they filmed in too? Wasn't it also in Ireland? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I totally forgot Ethan Hawke was even in this movie.
Yes, it's fun to see him get butchered, huh?
Oh man, it's like, and then you see later on when Alexander Skarsgård is at the slave camp where he, basically pretending to be a slave, and under his uncle, is the master, so he's there, and he sees this kid, or this, I guess young adult, young man, practice fighting with her, and then you see the two. He's surrounded. He's on the ground, and there's three guys around him, and they get the two spears, similar to the way his father was stabbed and killed. And it's like, and it just triggers him. And then what's really cool about this, keeping with the Viking and North mythology and all stuff. Like, I love how they everything's like Odin's and Fjolnir, and I love the fact that he has to, in order to get this fabled sword. This sword, he has to go to the gates of hell, Hel. Yes, and he has to defeat this undead guard in order to get this sword.
And if you can take this pebble out of my hand, you will have passed the test.
I know, it was weird. It was cool because only he can open the sword up. I don't take it out of the sheath, unsheath it. And it's like, that was kind of cool. But I mean, I wish this movie, as I said, behind stage, I wish it would have been like an 8-episode series on Amazon or something like that, or just instead of, because I felt like it was just like too long, and they wanted to put more into it, and I feel like they could have put more into it if they wanted to.
Sure,
really amp it up.
Yeah, and I think too, when we have TV shows, and there's been Viking type shows on that are popular, people have come from them and whatnot. I think, just generally speaking, there's a certain amount of action they feel are compelled to have to get into, and I think it's very difficult when you do things at a certain pace to change the nature of what you're trying to present in something else. And in this case here with Vikings, to your point, it's definitely a big deal because it's a longer film, and it's slowed down because it's almost more of a drama, really, if you think about it. Yes, there's brutality in here, there's gore, there's intestines, there's all sorts of nasty stuff in here. And I really like that, because when you do that at a high speed or you're a faster pace type thing, I don't think it lets the disgusting nature of that kind of stuff, the authenticity of it, sink in. And I hear in this film, to me, again, kind of like The Witch, kind of like The Lighthouse, you have those moments of grotesque stuff going on or happening, or a visual, and it can just sink in because your brain is on a different wavelength when you're used to going at a particularly slow pace, and the movie for the most part is that way. I agree with you about Ethan Hawke, and I think the fact that other people are in this film, because it's a great cast, are willing to play certain roles. Like, you have Willem Dafoe playing like the Joker at the beginning, and not really worry about it, and it works. And that's, I think, one of the things that ultimately is the best question. It's not who does this the best or who does it better, but does it work? Or if it's going to work, what vehicle does it has to be? And in our monthly James Bond movie reviews, we talk about that too, moving from one James Bond actor to another. Well, you have to kind of make the movie match them, even though we know what a Bond movie is, and that's the fun of discussing it. But in a movie like this, one of the things I want to celebrate about it too is, whether you like it or you think it's just okay or decent enough, or you go, well, I respect the nature of how great this film is, but it's not one that I would, repeatedly review. Here's the thing. It's rare for a movie like this or the other movies that Robert Eggers has done to get made. And I don't mean that in terms of money, because he had a smash financial hit early on, and that's propelled him. This one's done meh compared to its budget. But it was a passion piece. The people were all engaged in it. They've all been associated with it for a long time. That comes out on screen. And so to me, the CGI, while there's still some in here, it's not nearly as blatant like it is in most movies, at least from what I can tell. I like the fact that it's shot on location primarily. You've got the set pieces in here. You have all that authenticity, which, again, in a simple story, this one being revenge, those things add up, can make it really, really enjoyable to me. It can really be something that you can sink your teeth into. And we haven't even really talked about some of the silly stuff when you think about it, them having a big battle, at the gates of hell, literally speaking, there at the volcano. Come on. I mean, that's 80s cheese right at its finest, right? It's just done in today's terms.
It did. Almost like a Clash of Titans in a way, a sense, a little taste of that. Because going against Supernatural, an undead knight, and he has to get this sword. And Kiki, correct me. Apparently, the sword can only be used at night, not during the day. so anyone can use the sword. So that's even more ridiculous because he has to get rid of that sword then because he can't use it during the day. Oh, hold on. Can we wait to battle at night?
Okay, so let me ask you, as he's learning to be a slave and he's getting on the boat and he meets up with the, I'll loosely
Olga?
describe this. Yes, the
Yeah.
witch, allegedly, sort of, kind of.
Seer,
What
a
did you think of
sorceress.
her?
Um,
She has a look.
yeah, and I actually I thought she was pretty good for that. She said how she's like, you're a wolf. You're not, but you're not cunning. You're a berserker. You're like, let me slay their minds. You slay their bodies. Like, and I like how later on, like Fjolnir, the one he's supposed to, the one his uncle, took interest in her because her hair. And he comments. He says like, "Oh, your hair, it's like it's the color of the Valkyries." And that's kind of key because as far as what happens later in the movie. But remember, we're talking about Odin stuff, so of course the color of the Valkyrie, her hair like that, and that must be rare because her hair is like it's so blonde, it's white.
It's flaxen.
Yeah, like I said, as I also did this offline before too. We're talking about this. I said this would have been better as an RPG game. I like playing games,
but go ahead.
because I would have had more fun killing the people than myself than sitting him just sitting there, this like kind of like watching and then just like going, okay, all right, he's just fun, he's doing this. I'm more into video games. I'm more into interaction. I don't like.
You want action.
I want satisfaction tonight. Like I said, it's this was very close on being a supernatural movie, but as Kiki also pointed out, this is a drama. This isn't really even an action movie.
I don't want it. I'm glad that it wasn't an action movie, to be honest with you. I really am. Just like Conan has pieces of action in it, and we're referencing that because to me that's the gold standard of these kinds of films.
It had an equal balance. That's what it did.
I would agree with you on that.
I would say this is far in between as far as the action goes in this movie. It's far, it's just like probably the best scene is the last 40 minutes of this movie is the action part, where
that's because you like that. I mean, that's
and that's well, I said that's my point of view. I mean, you prefer to have more of the drama, I always stayed away from the drama section at Blockbuster. I said, screw that crap. That's for chicks.
No, that's rom-com.
I wanted action.
Not a romance film.
This is definitely a romance film.
It's romantic in the classical sense, not in the literal sense. Okay, and I think it is kind of a romance. It's like along the way he finds love. But then he decides he says I want. He was said I was told to have a choice. Be kind to my kin or give into my rage or revenge. So he's like, I want both. Fortunately, he does not get both. It kind of sucks. So it's kind of a bittersweet ending. Well, and I think that's the only ending you can have here because as a drama, there's no happy endings like they always promised is the old line. And unfortunately, I think sometimes when we get force-fed that, it dilutes the message it's trying to be because, kind of what you and I are saying, just the method is a little different and how they get there. I think with what they're trying to tell in terms of the story is what we've mentioned before, the hero's journey where you're trying not to do a lot. You have to overcome a lot to get to a point where you can get what it is you're supposed to get. In this case, it happens to be revenge, a pretty simple drive, okay,
Yep.
but one that we can all relate to. And it's, the woman's version would be the happily ever after, getting married, having kids sort of thing. Although for some women that may be slightly different today, but typically that's what it is. It's just what happens once you get married, and Hollywood never likes to, attack that. And here again, I think that what turns people off about this movie, generally speaking, instead of looking at it from just from a story perspective, is it's a very masculine film. It really is. There are people that do what they do, and that is it. There's no crossing over between lines. There's no, oh, I'm on this revenge kick and, I'm kind of tired, rowing. So I'll just go become a pacifist farmer. It's like, no, it's balls to the wall forward. There's no gray area. This shit's going to happen. How it's going to happen, I don't know, but damn it, it's going to be. And I'm going to pay the ultimate price to exact that. And I think that's a lesson, unfortunately, we don't get to see a lot. And, everything has a price, and are you willing to pay it? Okay, we'll pay it. Let's see what happens. And ultimately here, he pays, like you say, the ultimate price. He dies. However, to kind of go back to what you said before, which made me think of this, did you think the ending was really bittersweet because he died, What about Valhalla? What about, passing the tests of the gods? Does that matter? I think it's kind of an interesting way to end it. And again, going back to what we said about Conan, it's very cheesy over the top stuff. But at this point, I was like, fuck yeah, this is This is awesome. This is good shit. I was eating that up, bro. Were you?
That was kind of cool. Yeah. But honestly, the whole thing with the quote, what do you say? What do you say? Like, I am. This is what was the quote he had in this movie? He kept saying it over and over. He's like, I will avenge you, father. I will save you, mother. I will kill you, Fjolnir. I kept thinking, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. I can't. So once I thought of that, I was like, oh no. So it's like I tried to take this movie seriously because, and I give it props because unlike most movies, I'm glad this wasn't on Netflix. It would have been so diversified. In other words, woke. And I know people, and I don't.
We don't. Yeah, we usually don't go that way. But
I don't. I usually don't. I don't because I give movies a chance. I'm not a black pill. I do love a lot of movies. Like I said, but I was afraid they were just gonna, Hollywood has to do this. They like to put a propaganda speech in there because they think we're idiots. So they have to make movies to make us think a certain way. And when I was so happy they didn't do anything here, like, as far as like, because it's Iceland, I'm thinking like, all right, are they gonna because majority of the people, the Viking stuff, were for different lands, but I was so glad that like it actually kept it authentically historically correct as far as came down to the people, the acting, the weapons they use. I'm just glad it didn't get the Lord of the Rings treatment,
No, I agree with you totally, and
Yeah.
that's why I have red flags with any of the Lord of the Rings stuff coming up. TV shows and movies and whatnot. I have had that for a while, despite of course loving the books and stuff. I wanted to kind of touch a little bit too on the comment that Kiki had made in here in chat, and because I think it's an important element. I'm not going to call it religion. I'm going to call it mysticism. Because it does come across sometimes as a little bit trippy or weird. I think going back to the witch, for example, we're not quite sure if the lady really is a witch until maybe kind of sort of at the end. And one of the things about the witch that I thought was fantastic was, and again, very deliberately paced, is it almost like beats you down mentally, so you succumb to the atmosphere that he's trying to set. And it was very clear in the witch how no matter what might be going on, scientifically, you're going to say it's this, of course, because we don't necessarily really believe in witches, but you can see how people at that age with the just really harsh conditions they were in would be led to it. And I think, of course, we've come a long way where we can understand that no matter if you have a religious or mystical type of background or whatever, that there's similar concepts from different cultures, and in this case here we see some of that too. So I'm not going to sit there and call this a hardcore Christian film.
Although they did say like they blamed it. I bet it was Christians. They nailed their God to a cross. They killed us. I was like, and I killed our man. And it turned out, the girl Olga, they refer to her calling her a witch, but anything, she's just a scientist, a herbalist. Actually, she basically gave them psychedelic, mushrooms.
Yes,
made them trip balls.
Yep.
They started killing each other. I thought that was great. I was like, that's cunning. To me, that's not like she's a witch or anything like that. But I can see why people would say that, because people were simple. They were farmers. They were idiots.
And the other thing too about the story with her is, it makes a woman look strong in her own way, but it also, if you want to kind of get silly here for a moment, is it teaches you that even though you have a singular purpose, which a lot of people may not have, especially in today's world, in this case here, revenge, a very simple, basic drive. As long as you're committed to it, and you have help from others along the way, you too can achieve your goals, even if they include bloodshed, torture, and almost dying yourself until the very end. She wasn't
going out there with a sword. She was using her mind.
Exactly. And that was her way to
being cunning is
to the benefit of the group.
Yeah, she's more like a rogue of anything. You think about it, when it comes to stuff. She knew how to take out people without lifting a finger, really, without spilling of blood. I thought that was much interesting, because if this would have been on Netflix, they would have been different.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And Alexander Skarsgård's Amleth or Amleth, I can't remember how it was.
Skarsgård. That's all you have to say.
Yeah. His character wasn't stupid. He wasn't being belittled. He actually was well-written character. Of course, he said, like, I still said he should have killed his mother because, yeah.
Let's talk about this,
Oh,
because I
oh.
liked what they did with his mom here at the end. Because then you went, oh, they went there. Tell us about it. What'd you think?
When he finally, goes in, confronts his mother inside the hut, while everybody's tripping balls, pretty much kill themselves because they blame it on the night demons. They're being cursed because the past couple nights he's been killing guys and stringing them up, making it look it's horrific. So they thought it was like, remember, these are all pagans.
Yes.
The Norse stuff, they believe in all stuff. So they believe in different gods and punishing gods. They believe in hell, and they thought they were about to sacrifice an actual slave woman in order to ward off the evil spirits. And I was just like, dang, they're like just heartless.
When in doubt, offer blood.
Right.
And more than one scene in this movie too, for those of you that haven't seen it. And I'm just gonna not say what it is because it's very graphic, and I appreciated that they went there.
Yes. So while this is all going to chaos and all out there, he goes, confronts his mother and reveals who he is. But then she's like, oh, I never loved your father. He was a bastard. And she reveals that she has a slave marker stamp on her, or burn on her shoulder. She's like, he's told me from my village, he never loved me. I was his conquest.
Yep.
And she just says, like, oh,
literally.
I begged your uncle to kill him because, unlike your father, your uncle actually loved me. You were conceived out of rape, and like just totally just saying everything she can. Just she's so heartless. And
it was good. That was good stuff.
I thought right there he was gonna like just stab her, or she's gonna stab him, because the next thing you know, she's like, you're gonna kill you're just like your father. You're simple minded. You're gonna kill my Fjolnir and your uncle, and they're gonna kill my sons. But it's like, don't worry, we can start again. We can rule together, and I'll be your queen. And she kisses him. Like, I was like, oh, incest right away. I was like, well, that is accurate because there were people like that back then. And they're not just Southerners living in America.
Hey, people.
I know.
Hey,
now. So then I thought she was going to stab him like this point, but no, he just kind of pushes her off and calls her an evil, you can call her a bitch, but pretty much he's thinking that. And I'm like, he just walks away. I'm like, idiot, you should have killed her. Made it look like she got killed by the gods, and then just kept getting revenge. But he couldn't go through with it. And
that was probably the weakest part of the movie to me, because while I really love the reveal and the way it's explained, because you're not really thinking that because of all the things that are going on early on, and you're involved in his mind. You're not taking time to think about the possible outcomes. And so when that bomb gets dropped, you're like, oh yeah, that's good shit. And then you're like, wait a minute, you turn a wimpy little boy, Skarsgård. And look, I appreciate Skarsgård just like everybody that's in Hollywood, running a super cycle and putting on the weight and getting real cut, lean, and ripped. And I still look at him, and it's hard for me to take him seriously physically, even though he looks great, because I'm used to seeing him as not as jacked as he is. But you know what? I appreciate the fact he's 6 foot tall, probably, or maybe a little taller, and he's willing to have done what he did for this role. Because the one thing in Conan, we've talked about this before in all our 80s movies reviews, is that for the most part, you had people that were you're physically genuine and authentic to the roles they were in. And in Conan, all those other dudes he's having squabbles with and those heavy ass swords, they were legit powerlifters, bodybuilders. They were men among men, 220 plus.
Yeah, these were not really physically. These were just kind of like
jacked for the time.
Hired retired cops.
Yeah, and that's just the way people do it in movies these days. They go for the lean 150-pound soaking wet look, with some abs, and that's it. And it's just not the same thing as being 200, with some mass on you. It's just a different look. And again, I don't want to discredit the film with that by sound like I'm picking on something, but he'll do that. And Christian Bale will do it, and a few others, and I do appreciate that. And it makes for a more authentic viewing.
Kiki Wilson, I think she would have done it, but I think she would have killed him too. It's hard to say. She's conniving the way she had her husband killed, the king, the original king. And then, she tells him, she goes and she bosses her the Fjolnir, basically, oh, you need to go kill him. Go kill my son. And I was like, she's manipulative. Honestly, she could have just had him, let him get his revenge, and then killed him, Alexander Skarsgård's character,
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it was the demons that came in and stuff, killed him. and just could have escaped, went on to live on more, because Nicole Kidman's still a good looking lady, even though she's a little older, you know.
Well, at least the pitch of her from 20, 30 years ago from Dead Calm or whatever that she was
Well,
in with
I'm
the
saying
great
right
Billy
now,
Zane.
she's still good. And you think these are Vikings? Do you think
I
they
can't
care?
see past that plastic thing she wears on her face. I'm just saying she's appropriate for the role. I'm
Yeah.
goofing, but you're right, and she's an older woman, which Hollywood has a tough time finding roles for, and I'm glad that you see more of that to these days. But I'll simply say this: whenever we have a movie and it ends, I always ask myself, you know, did I like the ending or not? But was it appropriate? Because if at least if it is, you can kind of understand. But if it feels forced or preachy or messagey, I have a tendency to kind of revolt against that. And I thought here, yeah, he should die. And then, stupidly, I just didn't even think about Valhalla and all that kind of stuff. So when all that happens there at the end, I was like, yeah, this is good shit. That we're talking Vikings here. Where we're going to do Vikings. We're going to do Vikings 100%, not
Yeah.
50% or 25 or just a ship or a sword. Or none of that crap. We're going to full tilt boogie on
after
it.
this, he decides basically lets his mother live. He goes, and he returns to Olga, and she's like, "Did you kill her?" He's like, "No." It's like, and he's like, she's like, "Come with me." He's like, "No." He said, "You want you to leave, and I'm gonna stay in the morning, and I'll confront them." But then he can't. Like you said, he runs into the problem where he gets distracted by her fleeing, and he gets knocked over, because he took her oldest. Instead of killing his mother, he took away her elder son, stabbed him, and then tore his heart out. Like badass.
Literally.
Like
yeah, good shit.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's the way to hurt your mom more rather than whacking her.
So after that, like, he's like, he gets captured and he's hung up, and like his uncle's like, where's my son, where's my son's heart? And he's like, and he reaches around the pouch and he finds like, and he's like, are you sure that's your son's heart, or is that from the dog you killed two nights ago?
Yeah, I cannot condone any sort of dog violence in a movie, period. So I have to give it a strike for that.
You know what? But it wasn't him that killed the dog. It was the bad guy.
Just simply saying, I don't need to see dog stuff like that on screen. I just don't. It's uncalled for, really.
But if it was a cat, you're all for it.
Well, cats, I would have no emotional attachment to, so it's because it's a cat, so nobody would care, and frankly, nobody cares about that with cats. So
yes, yeah. So okay, so anyway, so they got him strung up. They got him naked, and they're beating up his eyes. His eyes really swollen up. He looks like Rocky after a fight. You see him hanging there, and they're like, he's like, I'm gonna get the heart, and I'm gonna rip your heart out, and then your mother gonna eat it. And so I'm thinking like, okay, it's very
maybe they will.
Very tough. But the funny part was, he says like, I'm not fated to die here, because I won't die here. He's like, and I'll escape, and then I'll freaking kill you myself, when the time is right. It's like, he's like the either he's stupid or he's just that brave, because like they could have killed him right there.
I think it's that complete and utter buy-in from the character's perspective.
Yeah,
because like I say, this movie is a bit mystical, and I'm not trying to say religious here in the sense that even though they have gods and stuff, but like we see ravens in here, so you're thinking Odin, right? We've talked about it before in the TV show, so they have elements of that in here too. So you can definitely see where his character would be like, "No, I'm all in, baby," and this is simply how it is. It's almost on a Jim Caviezel type level, that level of dedication and buy-in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it is still kind of religious, but not like Christianity. It's more like as far as the North mythology, like this, because it takes place in 890 AD, and it's basically back then they believed in different gods. In Iceland they had the Norse gods, but then others always they had their own other gods too, other than the Norse. So they, like you said, they hate the Christians, because the Christians, don't believe in their God. They're, and just like you could see historically that how accurate this kind of movie was.
And they had some of the writing too from that time with all, which was a nice touch.
Well, yeah. Every time they did a chapter, they had the the Viking kind of like Icelandic like writing on the wall on the and then translated in English. Because I was like, all right, are you gonna tell me what this is? Because I can't read sticks.
Well,
like I said, it was interesting to see that. I guess runes is the name of the thing they use. I thought runes were like stones or something like that.
Well, I mean, the way they write that would just be their particular language. So whether you call it that, their specific alphabet, I mean, I don't know if it was Finnish, Icelandic, Dutch. I really don't know, but that's its own thing. But they showed it to you and translated it. So again, it's a nice touch. It's being authentic, which is they really did try to achieve for that. They overshot, here. They definitely did not, you know, overpromise and underdeliver in this film. It's really quite the opposite, and I definitely felt that way in all three of Edgar's films. And we haven't even talked about the other two that much here on the Extreme Move Show. Some of them have made it in some of our lists, but if you haven't seen The Witch, if you haven't seen The Lighthouse, those are great watches too. I would say The Witch is more like this film. It's got a new world sort of feel to it, but then the Lighthouse, I'll simply say I think of it more as a character kind of piece too, and that was my pretty much only exposure to. I believe it's Robert Pattinson, right? The latest Batman who refused to work out
Yeah.
allegedly.
Yeah.
And I thought he was fine in it. Absolutely. So my judgment of him basically comes from that. But this film, for my final thoughts, I'll say this: I think it's a great film. It can be a great film, but not a fun film, or it can be long, dull, and boring. Those things can happen too. That being said, I definitely think it's worth a watch. I think if you want to see what a good film is or a great film, you watch this. It makes me go, he's on the short list of people that would go, what's his next film going to be? I'm automatically going to want to see it because he's done a film in the way that he wants to do it. And I feel like I enjoy it. And yes, it'll probably be a little bit long and slow and all that. And I don't care. I loved it. There's a very visceral element to it. And if none of that kind of stuff triggers you, or if you go, hey, what was the kind of stuff that 80s kids grew up on or 70s kids? Well, this would be that kind of a film, because this would be not just any other sword and sandal movie, say in the 80s. It would be a damn good one. And the problem with the 80s is some of the popular stuff overshadowed some of the other really great stuff like Conan that was out at the time. But this definitely would have fit in there. It's a great film. I think it's definitely worth watching. It's the best film I've seen so far this year. Your final thoughts, sir?
I like I said, I thought this was good. I said if you watched True Blood, Eric Northman, he's a Viking in his past, a vampire. Same guy, same actor. So it's kind of like that was the big joke when people said this. But I thought it was actually a decent movie. Like I said, longer than I thought, and I thought it should have been. But and honestly, I'd preferred it to be a TV series. I just like those 45 minutes or 8 hour, or 8 episodes.
Yep.
They could have done like that. And wow, we're getting a lot of spam bots here tonight.
Yes, we are. Start talking, R-rated stuff, and they show up.
Oh, and they said they love Alex. You know what it is? They love Ethan Hawke and Alexander Skarsgård.
Who doesn't love a Skarsgård?
Right. Final thoughts is actually, like I said, check it out for yourself. You might like it more than I did. Even though, like I said, I'll just point out this movie, it flopped in the box office. It didn't even make the budget. It hit set for itself.
Yep.
It only made 63.9 million out of the budget between 70 and 90 million dollars. So I can see why. Like I said, I think because it was longer and it wasn't as action packed as people were hoping for. That's kind of why it flopped. And also when it came out, I believe, when did it come out? Was it this year?
Yeah, it was April-ish.
I guess in Rigoletto Cinema.
Regal.
Yeah. That was not Regal. No, it's yeah. No,
Come on, Ed. Stop it.
No.
He's a ladies' man right now, literally.
Yeah.
But that's too TMI.
No, I'll just say this. Apparently this movie was released on March 28th originally, and then it can come to the United States on April 22nd. It depends where it was released. There might be some people who are still worried about going to theaters because of COVID. And then I said, I don't know if this went just finally with the streaming. Maybe it would do better on streaming.
Now, I believe. I think just this past week.
I mean,
you're right about the trailer. I'll simply say that. When you watch the trailer, you're like, oh, it's going to be blood and guts and gore. And you get that in there, but it's not an action movie. It's not. You're deceived. No.
Like I said, I would have rather played The Witcher.
Well, that's you.
That's a lot of us.
That may be true.
Yeah. Well, before we get some more spam in this spam-filled movie, check it out for yourself. I give it just above average score. I give it a 3 out of. I'd probably get a 3.5 out of 5.
For me, it's like a roughly a B plus. It's bordering on A material, just depending on how I think about it too. So if I watch the second time, it could go up or down a little bit, but it's really up there. So for us, for you
Netflix
stat heads
movie.
out there, it's at least one standard deviation above the norm. And damn it, even if we don't agree on what we like and don't like about it, I think the one trailing thing here is that it's an extreme movie. We haven't really said that about a lot of movies here on the Extreme Movie Show, but it definitely is. So while Samurai Cop 2 was extremely bad, Class of Nukem High was extremely bad, but you know what? That was our channel's introduction to trauma films. So while we may do more trauma in the future, you already know you're getting plenty of canon classics from the 80s too, and those are extremely
I'll,
entertaining ninja films.
you
What?
know, I'll sum this up. It's like the Arby's burger. That's what the movie is like. The Arby's burger right now. It sounds great, but you realize it's from Arby's. It's not normal burger place. So then you get into it, it's kind of underwhelming.
When you have mutilation and the kind of stuff in here, damn it just elevates it to me. So sometimes the sauce does make it better. You take that Arby's sandwich home, you put your own secret sauce on it, and bam, you're like, I'm good to go. There you go.
Yep.
Don't eat at Arby's is the lesson for tonight.
If
There
you're
you
going for
go,
burgers,
guys.
don't go with Arby's.
Hey, Kiki, thanks for showing up, and everybody else here
Yep.
in chat too. Ed, everybody else there. Jim, it's always great when you guys pile into. Boys in the Lab, I saw as a newer name on here, one I haven't seen before there. So it's, again, if you want to catch another film like this, he's got his 2 earlier films. Conan from the early 80s is spectacular. It's one of my all-time faves from the 80s. You can't go wrong with that. Great. It's rare that we get a film like this that's not only good, even if it doesn't meet our personal preferences in all areas, but that it does check the box off. It's definitely different and worth watching just for that alone. And if you disagree, let us know. And speaking of that, as we go here tonight, I want to thank everybody for showing up. I want to thank RDV for coming in as my guest, as always, here. We're going to be on live Sunday night, 7 p.m., movie to be determined. Some people have had some suggestion about stuff. Keep in mind and spread the word that on Father's Day, we will be reviewing Commando, because that's what we do when it's Father's Day, because in many ways, it's the ultimate fatherly
We will
film.
be reviewing Commando.
Exactly. So maybe
On
we'll
the
have some
weekend.
guests at that time. Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good night, everybody. Stay extreme.